Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Politics in the Pulpit, a lectionary-based preaching resource designed to ask the provocative question of how politics could appear in our preaching this week. I'm your host, Stephen, for this season, and I'm thrilled that you can join us for this very, very special episode. Today's guest is Phil Nevard. Welcome, Phil. How are you doing?
There's a build-up. Yeah, you mean the scraping the bottom of the barrel episode? Yeah.
Phil has been a minister in the United Reformed Church for over 30 years, serving across congregations across Cambridgeshire and Suffolk. Before ministry, he worked in a variety of jobs, from care work to rates office, experiences that have shaped his down-to-earth approach to faith and justice. Phil is well known to many from his Talking Absolute Worship vlog and podcast, which ran through the COVID years. He is passionate about preaching, community life, and a good dose of humor, which we need. We need that. Outside ministry, he is an avid supporter of the Battery Hen Welfare Association, helping rehome thousands of chickens, and a lifelong Bolton Wanderer fan, which he says has taught him plenty about patience and perseverance. Amen to that. Amen to that. So welcome to you, Phil. Joining us today from J-Pit is Simeon Mitchell, the J-Pit team leader. Hello, Simeon. How are you doing?
Hi, good to see you both.
Fantastic. So, Phil, what we often do is we ask our guests this really pertinent and important question. Does politics belong in the pulpit?
Well, my guess is that you vet your participants in this in this podcast, and you're expecting them to say yes, aren't you? So I was desperate to say no, just to be controversial. But yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. But I mean, how would I describe that? What does that really mean? Because it's easy to say, isn't it? And I think when I was a much younger preacher, I had a whole lot of cliched answers to that question. So it's probably just why you didn't ask me 30 years ago. I'd have just said stuff like, "Oh yes, I preach with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other hand." You know, that kind of stuff that people say at college. Or I'd have said, "Yes, it's politics with a small p, not a big P," or that kind of stuff. I had all those sort of. I don't think I'd really thought through what it meant. And I think I kind of grasped it far too late in life, what it's about, in reading Walter Brueggemann. Brueggemann's right about everything, so I think I'm on safe ground. But he has a book called The Prophetic Imagination.
Yeah, I've got that here somewhere.
I think one of the things he does. Look, it's on the shelf there. There it is. One of the things that Brueggemann does, he doesn't make that split between prophetic ministry and the preaching ministry that some people do, as if they're entirely separate things. He treats them as kind of the same thing, which I think is fantastic. And he talks about all preaching is political. He says, whether you intend it to be or not. If you're trying to avoid politics, then what you're doing is you're either propping up the status quo, or you're offering a kingdom narrative as a counterpoint to this. He says that preaching is an imaginative presentation of what the kingdom of God looks like, an alternative vision to the empire values of the world. And that's what preaching is. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not, I mean, when we say politics, we kind of think of parties and we think of policies, and I think, it's not really about that. It's something grander than that. It's something far bigger than that. It's helping people glimpse a future that God has already dreamed, that is already part of what God has for the world. God's not finished with us yet, because God's got this dream for the world, and we have to paint that picture. We have to help the congregation imagine that picture. And in doing that, then you're opposing the narrative of empire. Automatically, you're doing that. If you're presenting, what does it look like to live in the kingdom of God? What would the world look like if we were living in the kingdom of God? Then you are automatically offering an interruption to the dominant script, which is about fear and scarcity and self-sufficiency, and you're offering God's vision instead, which is about abundance and justice and grace and all those things. So yeah, I go with Bruggeman, which is a safe place to be. All preaching is political, whether you think it is or not, and you're either propping up the empire or you're undermining it with an alternative vision. So yeah, the short answer is yes.
Fantastic answer. I love that prophetic imagination, that presenting an alternative to what we see. I think that's beautiful. Beautiful because that's God's intent, that's God's dream, and we are the people that are, instruments to make it happen. So we need to work together to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get some context for this week with recent news. Please do bear in mind, listeners, that the news that I'm referring to now might be out of date at the time that you listen to it, but it's still relevant in the grand scheme of things. That's a long intro to what I'm going to say. So this week, Palestine Action ban will be reviewed after the government tried to block the appeal, that is. London schools will get air filters to reduce pollution. And King Charles will be the first British monarch to pray with the Pope in 500 years, meeting on Thursday. Trump is planning to meet Putin in Budapest over ending the Ukraine war. So there's a lot of news there to kind of, I was going to say chew the fat, but I don't like chewing fat. There's a lot of news for us to digest there.
I'm a vegetarian, yeah.
Yeah. Let's stay away from fat. So this episode, we're focusing on Sunday, the 2nd of November, I believe. And that is the 21st Sunday after Pentecost in ESC. And there are several awareness days and themes to bear in mind this week. Number one is All Saints Day on the 1st of November. And it's the JPIC conference on the 8th of November. Make sure that you're there. And we encourage you and your congregations to explore creative ways to respond, to pray, to campaign, and take local action to everything that we discussed today. But remember, as we discussed last week, you're not in this alone. We're all in this together, or something like that. So let's have a look at our lectionary readings for this week, Sunday, the 2nd of November. We'll be looking at Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, then on to chapter 2, and again 1 to 4. Psalm 119, verses 137 to 144. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 1 to 4, and then 11 to 12. And the gospel reading for this week is from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. There are alternative readings for the 1st of November for All Saints Day, but if you're going down that route, please explore that on your own. So, Phil, is there a passage that you'd like to preach from, or a theme that you've seen gleaned across the lectionary text?
I'd normally preach with two. I think it's mostly what a congregation would handle. If you're trying to whack four at them, it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? So I stick to the ones in probably references and prayers or whatever as stuff that they may not notice, but it gets the words in. Thinking about it now as you were just talking, I kind of usually have in my head a dominant passage which sets the tone, and then the other one usually kind of supports it or follows it up. And I think probably in this Habakkuk's the dominant passage for me that gives the sort of bass notes and the rhythm and the beat to how I preach, and Zacchaeus offers a kind of a illustrative outworking of that. So I think I'd probably start with Habakkuk, I think, just to establish what we're talking about, and then I'd probably use Zacchaeus as a kind of, this is what it looks like in practice sort of reading. That's probably where I'd go looking at it.
That is fantastic. So without further ado, I think we should begin with Habakkuk. I've written a little note for myself which says waiting for God's justice. Maybe you can talk us through maybe a summary, Phil, of where you begin or how you would approach the Habakkuk reading.
It's I quite like that, waiting for God's justice. I quite like giving things titles. I have little titles in my head. I always intend to use them somewhere. I had a couple of possible titles for this one, but Habakkuk. One of them was God's vision belongs on public walls. It kind of starts off, doesn't it, Habakkuk? How long we're going to cry, blah, blah, blah. All the world's going into chaos. Everything's going wrong, corruption and violence, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just the world that's going wrong, it's God that's going wrong, isn't it? If you look at it carefully, it's God that's going wrong. How long will you not listen? So God's within that litany of stuff that's going on. He doesn't escape. You're not even listening. How long is it going to be? So I mean, it's familiar, isn't it? It's familiar from the Psalms. We've heard those kind of words before. The wicked are surrounding me, blah blah blah. And it washes over me, that stuff, when you read it now from the Old Testament, until you get to the bit about I will stand at my watch post, and that sort of that phrase, the watch post, is the waiting thing that I think you've picked up on, Stephen, isn't it? Yeah. I will keep watch and wait. It's like that Psalm. Is it Psalm 130? It is kind of about the world's going. What can you say on this podcast? The world's going wrong. Let's go with that. What's the answer? God seems to say, wait. The answer is wait. And it's not the answer anybody wants, is it? What do we do, God? The world's going wrong. Wait. But then there's also this bit about write the vision on tablets. And this weird phrase, so that a runner may read it. So I spent some time thinking about that. Firstly, the waiting, because I preach a lot about this, and Advent's coming up. So we're all saving up our stuff to think about waiting, aren't we? Because that's what we have to talk about during Advent. What is waiting? What is it to wait? Advent, I usually get my congregation to sit, and we put an electric kettle on, and we fill it right to the top, and we just sit. And I say, we're going to just sit and watch this kettle and wait for it to boil. It's the most tedious thing. But waiting, it's like, it's not just twiddling your thumbs and doing nothing while you wait for the kettle to boil, is it? Or if you're me, I'm like in the kitchen, and while I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, I'll eat a piece of cheese, some cake, like 3 or 4 biscuits, and it's a different kind of waiting. And I think this waiting is about it's about a posture. I like the word posture these days. Lots of people use the word posture. It's taking a posture of prayer and protest and hope, and that's what we do when we wait. It's about staying awake. It's about being attentive. It's about being there. It's about turning up. It's about not abandoning the struggle. Because I'm in Canada at the moment, I tuned into the URC Sunday service yesterday. I was massively disappointed because it was me. I'd forgotten it was me. But it was about the widow who's trying to get justice from the judge.
Yes.
And she can't get justice from the judge. It's a bit like this, the world's going wrong. But what she did was she just kept turning up. She just kept turning up. And apparently that's like a thing for Asian feminist theologians. Survivor wisdom, they call it. Sometimes all you can do is turn up and be visible. And there's something about that in Habakkuk. It's you just have to wait, and you have to be there. You have to be alert. You have to be awake. You have to be attentive, and you have to be resistant and stand firm. It's not an invitation to do nothing. It's an invitation to stay faithful while you wait and to live as if the vision was already true. However, there's this billboard stuff, which I think is fantastic. Write the vision on tablets. I think if he was writing today, he'd say it on a bus, wouldn't he, or something like that. The other news headline from this week, or maybe last week, I don't know if you saw it, was a graffiti artist in Canterbury Cathedral. People are outraged about J.D. Vance and who's that little squirt who has all the money in America and funded all of Trump's stuff. What's his name?
Elon Musk.
That's the fella, yeah, right. It's apparently Elon Musk and J.D. Vance are outraged because it's sacrilege having graffiti in a cathedral. But I think maybe that's what Habakkuk would say. He'd say, get graffiti artists. This vision that we need to write it so that it's seen. Yeah. And it needs to be written big. I kind of think maybe we need to employ fewer children's workers and more graffiti artists in the URC to write this vision big somewhere on motorways and on buses and on train carriages and stuff. Wouldn't that be ace if the URC just poured its money into graffiti artists writing God's vision on walls all across Britain. Yep. No. Okay.
Do you
I'll
know
just
what
put it out there for the church vision group.
having said that, I did share some time ago that street art. This is graffiti that is pleasing to the eye or not so pleasing to the eye, depending on which angle you're looking at it from. Street art is a lot like evangelism. Write the vision, make it plain. If we do write the vision and make it play on walls and places everywhere, some people will look at it, they will stop, they will stare, they will wonder, they will be captivated by the words that are there or the images that are there, because we live in a visual age. Some people, they will look at what's there, or happily ignore it, walk past it. Oh, that's what is that? What is that marking on the wall? So it's really interesting the way that we look at things from different points of view. I think you said something really interesting there as well, Phil, that I'll just pick up on, and I'll bring in Simeon as well. In the ways that when we're waiting, that God is calling us to do is prophetic waiting. It's not just waiting, it's not just passive, but it's a call to be alert and engaged in what is actually happening in our world today. But we have to be careful, because we're living in a world in which was people can really relate to what's going on in Habakkuk. There's violence, there is there's Gaza, there's Ukraine, there's the cost of living, there's this, there's that, you name it. So there's violence and injustice, and we're fed up, and we're saying to God, hey, what's going on, God? How do we balance this righteous anger, prophetic anger, with patient hope? Simeon, at that point, I'm going to look at you to bring some wisdom to that.
I feel I've heard a lot of wisdom already. It's a great treat to have a passage from Habakkuk, isn't it? Because it doesn't crop up very much in the lectionary. I think this might be the only week, or there might be just a couple of weeks when we get to look at it. And it sent me scurrying away to my research books, because I didn't really know anything about Habakkuk, and I don't think I've preached on this passage before. It turns out no one knows anything about Habakkuk from what I've read. There's very little knowledge of what's going on. They date it to the kind of middle to late 7th century before Christ, and it's a time when the Neo-Babylonians, or the Chaldeans, were on the rise. They were kind of the top dogs in the territory. Jerusalem was under threat, or perhaps even had been under occupied. People had experienced brutality from this rising empire. So I guess that explains that the lament with which it begins. People are experiencing this sense of having been abandoned, of being downtrodden, and of wondering what God is up to in that setting. But like you, Phil, I noted that line about being called to stand at the watch post, and that looking out for God. And I wondered, where would Habakkuk's attention be directed when he was looking out for God to respond? Would it be at the sky? Would it be at the people on the ground? Because I suspect there is wisdom to be found in listening to both the voice of heaven and the voices of those who are experiencing marginalization at this moment. And then the thing that really jumped out at me was the same line that you've talked about, the write the vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read them. And yeah, what is the contemporary equivalent of writing on tablets? I guess in our digital age, maybe tablet is still a relevant place for vision to be shared. Tablets and phones and screens, which are the way in which so many of us receive most of our information and are shaped. But also, I guess it's the bus stop, isn't it? It's the advert on the bus stop, which a runner will see as they go past it and get the 6 words, which is the maximum, I believe, the advertising people tell us is what you can have on a bus stop poster. And what would that message be? It doesn't actually say, does it? But it says it's a vision, and the vision is something about this not being the only experience that you're going to have, this not being the future, this not being the end. So it is something about hope, and my 3-line title for this was about living hopefully and then acting to make that hope a reality, because I think that's what it's calling us to. This is an age when I certainly have felt that many things that I've thought were really important markers of progress have been squashed, and feels like things are going backwards in lots of ways. I've been really affected, I guess, by the last few months, the rise in the kind of anti-migrant, anti-anyone kind of sentiment, and the expressions of Christian nationalism that are now more prevalent in our society. And I, yeah, feel like shouting and wondering what's going on. But this calls me to hold on to that vision, and not only to hold on to it, but to proclaim it to others, to articulate it, to share it, not to just keep it to myself, which I think is the other thing that comes out of this. I was thinking too about we're participating as JPIT in a campaign being run by our colleagues in Together with Refugees, which is a kind of coalition of charities and faith groups and others who are concerned about how refugees and people seeking asylum are treated in our country, and obviously wanting to challenge a lot of the current narratives around that. And they're asking people to just put up a poster. Put up a poster in December, particularly the first weekend of December, and we will share information about this for those who are interested. But a poster that just says, "We stand together with refugees." And for that to be something that's visible in homes, in community centres, in churches, on notice boards around the place, I guess in contrast to those who were putting up flags or painting flags on roundabouts with a kind of with hostile intent. So I wonder, yeah, what might we do? What might you do as a community to make your hope, your vision visible to others? That's, I guess, the question I would want to leave people with.
I'm so pleased to hear that, Simeon, because one of my other titles for this Habakkuk thing, and I think that's fun. I love the way that you said, "Where would he look?" Because in my head, he was on the city walls and he was looking out into the desert. And actually, you've kind of turned that on its head and said, "No, he's looking at the people." It's like, oh, it's fantastic. What a great way of seeing it. But my other title for this, if I had a title, would be God's vision for justice is meant to travel faster than despair.
Wow.
I kind of think we're just so crap at this, aren't we? This getting the vision out there, whereas the peddlers of despair are geniuses at getting this message to spread. And I think that's what's behind write it so big that a runner can see it. Something that can move fast, that can be spread before despair can catch it up. And maybe the posters is one way of doing that. Just to start to say, no, we're part of spreading something else that is gonna run faster than despair. And if we could achieve that, then it's waiting with purpose, isn't it? And it's waiting creatively. And so I'm really pleased to hear that. I'm looking forward to sticking them up. Yeah,
I think there's something there about hope traveling faster than despair. I love that. I'm thinking of hope at the speed of light. To infinity.
Oh, yeah.
That's just where my mind goes. Because I love Toy Story and all things
Toy
like
Story.
Exactly that. Exactly that. But what God says here in chapter 2, for there still is a vision. There is a vision for an appointed time. It speaks to the end. And it does not lie. Even if it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. I'm just going to add to that what Phil said there. It will come at the speed of light. Hope travels faster than despair. And I think that is encouraging. That is something that we should be putting up everywhere. Hope travels faster than despair. I think we're going to hop, skip, and jump now to Luke chapter 19, verse 1 and 10. And Phil, I'm coming to you for some more wisdom. Zacchaeus and the economics of grace is what I've called this one. Because he just... he's got caught. He's got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and he says, "Jesus, I'm going to return everything back." What did you glean from this gospel reading today?
Well, it's far too early in the morning for more wisdom, Stephen. Zacchaeus was a very little man, and a very little man was he. That's basically it, isn't it? He climbed to the top of the sycamore tree. Yeah. I once did this with some children and decided I'd climb up a stepladder to tell the story as if I was up a tree being Zacchaeus, and I got stuck at the top of the stepladder. I got wedged, and Zacchaeus literally got stuck in the tree and couldn't come down. So, so what's going on? What's going on here? I think I think through this because, yeah, Habakkuk leaves it hanging, as you said, Stephen, and also Simeon said. Yeah, there is a vision, but he doesn't spell it out. God doesn't like do the useful thing, like telling him what it is, which would be nice. That would have been nice, wouldn't it? Here it is. This is the actual thing you're going to write. I know you just need to figure that out for yourself. But of course, that's where we go, isn't it? We say, Jesus is the embodiment
That's right.
of what this vision is. You see it. You see it, and you see it in Jesus' life. And here it is in Zacchaeus. And people don't really like it. As this much hated little man. And grace comes to visit, doesn't it, in the person of Jesus in Zacchaeus' life. And this is what grace looks like. God's vision for the world is something called grace. And people don't like it. It's a bit, when you read a Bible story that you've read like a billion times, and then you read it and another line stands out, you didn't expect it. And back to the crowd grumbling when Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house. I used to think that was just because they'd all gone to see Jesus too, so they're a bit jealous. And why would he pick Zacchaeus? But I think there's actually something deeper going on here about what grace does when it disturbs where people think grace is merited, and they don't think grace is merited for Zacchaeus. And they don't think that's where God's grace should be directed. And so they don't like it. It's a scandal, not him. Grace disturbs the moral order and the social boundaries of their little lives. Grace goes where reputation says it shouldn't. And Jesus just offers it in places that just really annoys people. And Zacchaeus is one of them, because there's plenty of candidates there who they think, no, we know who deserves grace and it's not him. So there's that. I was just fascinated by that. Just you kind of say, here's God's vision, but people are resistant to it because it challenges their social status or their social norms, and they don't think people deserve it, and they don't want that vision suddenly because it's more disruptive than the chaos around them sometimes. So just because we're offering God's vision doesn't mean to say it's going to be popular. It's going to be the thing that people want. Just because it looks great to us doesn't mean it looks great to anybody else, because they're saying no. I mean, that's the thing with refugees. The reason why churches are not going to want to put these posters up, Simeon, is because they're going to think people are going to throw stones at our windows, aren't they, if we stick it up in our church? And they say, well, hang on, suddenly it's not quite so popular anymore. Suddenly this message of standing with refugees is not quite such a great thing, because it actually challenges how we might be seen in the churches we serve. When I was in London, that was the BNP, and it was putting up posters about whether or not they were welcome or not in our town. And my church had a real crisis about it, because they said, well, people will put our windows in if we put those up. I said, well, if they do, that's great, isn't it? They said, no, it's not, Phil. Well, no, it was a symbol of what we stand for, wouldn't it? Yeah, I know. We don't want our windows put in. And it's a real thing for churches, isn't it? Because that's where the rubber hits the road. I
think you're right. You're definitely right. That is where the rubber hits the road. But you've really helpfully given us a picture that I think the church should be challenged by. This is real prophetic imagination. This is what happened when grace meets greed in our world today. Something is going to change, and it has to be us. It has to be us. So yeah, you on a roll. Keep going. I love this. This is exciting.
That's true. You're assuming there's more, right? Zacchaeus is changed by grace, as you say. Something has to change, and it's not just I've changed inside. I've become a different person. The whole fabric of Zacchaeus's economic order has changed, doesn't it? He's given away half of his goods to the poor. It's not just a moral change within his heart, which I think sometimes Christianity has said that's what we're all about, moral change of the heart. No, this is a change in the fabric of the relationship Zacchaeus has with the village, isn't it? It's economic and it's relational, and the two are going together. You have to hope that he's embraced by the village after this. I kind of have a cynical suspicion that he's still hated after this, but it's not how we tell the story, is it? Suddenly he's a hero and he's carried through the village. I don't think that's what happened. It was an actual change. Salvation. When Jesus says salvation has come to this house, he doesn't just mean that Zacchaeus has got to heaven. Salvation looks like a change in the social fabric, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's I guess it's like Bruggeman was saying when I was saying about politics in the pulpit. Jesus has called out what's wrong with the empire, with the current order of things. He's called it out. It's got to change, and it does change. But then he's pointed to what the new kingdom of God values look like, and it looks like grace. So it's not just Zacchaeus who's challenged. Zacchaeus is challenged, and Zacchaeus changed. But it's not just about Zacchaeus changing. I don't think this is about the whole village changing, and seeing what grace looks like when it hits a person's life. I think. But there you go.
I think it's also it's really practical as well, isn't it? Because it's saying, you know, what you believe, what you've experienced through your faith, has something to do with what you do with your money, has something to do with how you choose to interact with the world. And your money is a very good expression of your interaction with the world. So for me, it took that vision right down into the nitty gritty, the reality of how we live our lives and the plane in which we live them. So for me, this spoke into questions about reparative justice. All of our church denominations in JPIT have been wrestling with what it means to carry the legacies of slavery and to own our part in that, and to think about what we might do in response to that and at various stages in that journey. But everyone, I think all have recognized that reparative justice is part of this, and this is an example here of that in action, and that paying back 4 times as much as you might have taken at some point, as well as giving half your stuff to the poor. You know, this is sacrificial levels of rebalancing. But it also took me into thinking about tax. And I know this is not necessarily a popular subject or an easy subject, but there's a budget coming at the end of November. This is a time when decisions about tax are being debated in the public space, in political spaces. We all know that the public finances are in a difficult position. And yet there is also a whole bunch of stuff that many people want to see happening in terms of investment in ending child poverty, in cutting NHS waiting lists, in building more affordable housing. All these things take money. And the big question is, where's that money going to come from? I've long thought that the tax system is an expression of our shared commitment to each other, rather than something that we just try and, all try and minimize the amount of tax that we are taxed. Tax is, can be a blessing rather than a curse. Obviously, Zacchaeus was involved with a tax system that was perhaps taking from enriching him rather than enriching society for good. But I think it does open up a space for a bit of a conversation about what we see the purpose of tax being and the purpose of money in a community being. A group of Christian and church bodies at international level have in the last couple of years been proposing something they've called a Zacchaeus tax or a Zac tax. I don't know if you've come across this idea, but CWM and the World Council of Churches and a number of other of those kind of big bodies which have been thinking together about the global economic and financial infrastructure have come up with this idea of a Zacchaeus tax or a Zac tax, which transforms the global tax system so that it, like Zacchaeus's actions here, delivers equity and makes reparation for historic and structural injustice, whether that's around climate or around slavery or around industrialization. And that's a kind of rebalancing, which results ultimately in a transfer of wealth from those who hold more of it to those who have less of it. And that might be something that I would want to explore through this reading on this Sunday as we look towards the budget as well. And what's our attitude to that?
Yeah. And, along with that, Simeon, in addition to that, I'd love to stick a parental advisory sticker for all churches saying this is heavy duty theology. This is what repentance looks like in our economic systems. Taxation, wealth, I want to call it corporate accountability for those organizations that aren't paying their Zac tax, let's call it. What does that look like for them to repent and say, actually, I have done social harm, or I have done harm to people in more ways than one, but how can I repair or restore what has been harmed. So there's a lot for us to think about there, and the sticker there kind of lets you know this is what we're going to be doing. So be prepared to do your part in this, because we can't point at people that are doing it and then not do it ourselves, if that makes sense what I'm saying. That's like Jesus, describing, you got a log in your eye, and someone has said, no, but you've got a 2x4 in your eye. Haven't you seen the difference in it? So I think there's a lot that we can do as people to talk and think about the economics of grace. I think let's do that. Let's do that work.
Ooh, yeah, I like that. I like your public health warning, Stephen. I think we should stick that on most of what Jesus says, to be fair. But I had a title for this one, which kind of squeezes its way into that idea. It did actually start warning. So there you are. We're on the same page. It said warning: when grace enters a house, the furniture of power gets rearranged. Which is kind of what you hope, isn't it? But I think the furniture was rearranged in this story of Zacchaeus. I'm really enthused by this. So thanks for introducing us to that, Simeon. Because that rearranges the furniture internationally, doesn't it? And that would just be such an inspiring thing to get a hold of. I'm inspired again. Posters and Zac tax. It's all coming.
And one final thing before we move on completely to the other two readings in the lectionary, I think there's an invitation from Jesus that restores Zacchaeus back into the community. It says in verse 9, I believe it is, because he too is a son of Abraham. He too is a son of Abraham. So he's no longer on the outskirts. He might still not be liked by people in the community, but he is a part of the community. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because Jesus' invitation transforms Zacchaeus' relationship with money, with community and people, and with justice. He's no longer the only rich person in the room. He's now giving that wealth away and restoring what other people should have had.
I go with that, Stephen, because it's just my cynicism. It's just my cynicism, I think. So I don't think they really liked it. Maybe they did, and that would be the best way of preaching it, I think, because that is a powerful message.
What about the Psalms? Let's move to the psalmist. Psalm 119. Yeah. Psalm 119 is a very long psalm, so we're looking specifically at verses 137 to 144. Did you glean anything from that?
Yeah. I don't really like Psalm 119. It's not just because it's really long. I just don't like it. It just sounds very smug, if you're allowed to say that. Is that blasphemous? I don't know. It just sounds very self-satisfied. I love the law, and it just goes on and on, doesn't it? But however, it is an opportunity to focus on some really key words for politics in the pulpit, I think. And Psalm 119's got them all, and this passage has got two of them. And that is righteousness and justice. Sometimes they say law in some of the bits. I think it's justice, righteousness and justice. Righteousness, tzaddik, and mishpat. I don't know much Hebrew, but if folk want to know two Hebrew words that will get you through most preaching, those are the two: tzaddik, righteousness, and mishpat, justice. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know any others. Righteousness, we tend to think that's about being holy, don't we, and being a sort of a particularly well-behaved person, but it's nothing of the sort. Righteousness is about keeping good relationships, restoring relationships. Is what righteousness is. It's about healing and creating good relationships between people, between us and creation, whatever, between us and God. All of the relationships, the whole span of relationships that you can possibly imagine, righteousness covers them. Keeping good relationships. And justice, I think justice again isn't about the law and paying fines. In this context, justice is about the outworking of that harmony of that righteousness brings. It's about creating the structures that allow everyone to live in dignity. That's about putting things right so that everyone can flourish. That's what justice means. Mishpat means putting the world right so that everyone can flourish. It's what love looks like if you write it into our social fabric. And if that's not politics, then I don't know what is. Writing love into our social fabric is what mishpat is, justice, which is often coupled with the third and final Hebrew word that I know, which is chesed, which is steadfast love, which is just such a fantastic pair of words, steadfast love, which I think comes up in Thessalonians, so I'll save that for Thessalonians. But, there's not much to say about Thessalonians, all right? So I'll save that up. So yeah, if I was going to use Psalm 119, it would be to introduce those words, what they're about, what they look like, and how they obviously apply to everything we've already said. In the Zacchaeus story, that's an outworking of what righteousness and justice look like in practice in the life of a person when grace comes to call. And the relationships are healed. If you're going back into your news stories, probably ought to mention those. You said at the beginning, Stephen, that
King Charles, me and the Pope. Yeah,
that's the fella. Yeah, is gonna pray with the Pope, and I thought I saw this. I thought, all right, is that really true? That the British King hasn't prayed with the Pope for 500 years. And I looked it up, and I reckon it's way more than 500 years. I don't think there's any evidence that Henry VIII prayed with the Pope. Clement never came across here, and he never went across there, so they can't have prayed together. They didn't have the internet, so Henry VIII never actually prayed together in the same room with Clement, whichever number it was back then. But if we're talking about restored relationships, then I suppose that's a picture of a broken relationship that's been broken for a very long time, and it might be a small thing, but actually it might be a big thing to make what righteousness is. It's restoring relationships that have been broken.
I want to share with you a word in Hebrew that I've learned, and which means thank you. It's todah. For someone that doesn't really like Psalm 119, that was really beautiful. I really enjoyed that.
Well, I was just going to thank Phil for answering a query that was at the back of my mind. Sometimes those of us who preach from the lectionary have this fun challenge of thinking, well, why on earth did the people putting this together put these passages next to each other? And I can kind of see the connections between Psalm 119 and Habakkuk. It's that it kind of colours in that what hope looks like, doesn't it? It adds depth to that. I was really struggling to see the connections with Zacchaeus, and I thought it was just because there was a line about being small and despised. But you, Phil, have rescued that. For me, because there is also what righteousness lived out looks like, what redemption lived out looks like, and that is a much better note to end this conversation about Psalm 119 on than just thinking about being small and despised.
There's something that I saw in Psalm 119 just before that verse is that your promise is well tried. I think in other versions it talks about a love for God's word, and that for me is like an anchor, especially when our institutions, our governments, our leaders feel a little bit unreliable. That's my opinion. You can do with that what you will. But I believe that this is an anchor for us, that we have a God who is righteous, especially in an era of misinformation, someone that we can rely on. But let's put it that way. That's a nice segue. We're going to again hop, skip, and jump to 2 Thessalonians. Chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, and then on to verses 11 and 12. Faith that endures under pressure. Thank you. I'll take a bow later. So, Phil, what did you glean from this letter?
Okay, yeah. I've got a title for this as well because I was on a roll with titles. Nobody ever sees these titles, so it's nice to be able to tell someone what they are. It's thirsty by head. So this one is God's justice is still moving even when history feels stuck. It kind of this Thessalonians links back to the Habakkuk thing and the whole waiting thing. For me, I think I'm right. I should have looked it up because now I'm going to look stupid if it's not. But I think Thessalonica, is this the place that Paul had to escape from Was it like in a basket or something? Because there were riots in the street, I think. Or you haven't looked at it either, right? So I think I'm going to say confidently, I think it's a troubled place, and it clearly is from these words, that they're experiencing sort of persecution. They're under pressure, as you say. A fantastic musical interlude, notwithstanding, and so maybe if Zacchaeus is like an example of how grace enters a person's life, this is maybe an example of how a community, a faith community, responds under pressure and under persecution, and whilst waiting for the world to change and waiting for God's grace to catch up. When you feel stuck in this loop of chaos and persecution and everything going wrong. And so that's why we've got all this stuff about steadfastness and faith during all your persecutions and afflictions that you're enduring. And I think this word enduring is a nod to the kind of waiting that Habakkuk was talking about. It's not just grim. It's not just grim hanging on. It's they're doing far more than just hanging on, because the couple of sentences before it says, your faith is growing abundantly and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. So somehow what they're managing to do as a faith community is increase their love for one another whilst under massive pressure from the world outside. And they appear to have discovered that this isn't a solo journey in this chaotic world, that this is a journey that we make together as a community, and maybe waiting is something that we do as a community, and we don't do alone. Maybe that's just something that's really encouraging. And if I'm preaching this to my congregation, I'm saying this is what this congregation is or should be. It's a group of people who are in Advent waiting together. We're not waiting on our own. We're waiting together and drawing strength from one another. And our love for one another is increasing. So he always gives thanks to God for them, because they're such a glowing example of this. And I just think that's fantastic. So that's probably where I go. God's justice will ultimately set everything right, but it's not happening now in Thessalonica. So they're waiting for God's justice to catch up. They're waiting for they're stuck in history. So but God's justice is still moving, but they can't see it. They can't see that God's on the move. They're stuck in this loop. But somehow, in the middle of that, they are held up as Paul, as a glowing example of a church whose faith is growing abundantly and their love for one another is increasing, which I think is just such an encouraging message, or should be. That's all I've got.
Especially encouraging, especially because this church was facing persecution. And I think, although persecution in the Western church looks different, I always kind of quote Einstein's theory of relativity at this point. People are persecuted, but their understanding and experience of persecution is different for each and every person. So I think there is encouragement there for us, but there's also a challenge that goes in line with all the readings that we've discussed today. Persevering in the face of costly love. We talked about Brueggemann. I just love how Bonhoeffer kind of reminds me of the cost of grace, the cost of love, and the cost of justice. The cost of justice. It costs us something, but the reminder that we don't do it alone. We do it together in community. And I think that is a worthy reminder to continue to persevere, especially today. And Simeon, you're going to offer us even more words of wisdom from 2 Thessalonians at this point.
Only a very few. I think it says to me something about the power of high expectations as well, doesn't it? Because it's written in a hopeful way. It's Paul and Silvanus and Timothy don't actually know what's going on in Thessalonica at the time when this letter is going to be received, but they have that expectation that people will be growing abundantly in faith and loving each other in increasing ways. And in a way, just by saying that that's their expectation, I think that's more likely than that's what will be happening. So I think there's something as well about when we've caught hold of hope, caught hold of that vision that we were talking about around Habakkuk, to actually hold ourselves to it and hold others to it too. We believe in this. So yes, that urges us on to ever greater kind of aspiration to grow towards this vision becoming a reality.
I love that.
Amen.
Amen indeed. So Habakkuk has reminded us to stand watch, and he dares to believe that God's justice will come. Zacchaeus climbed a tree, and he dared to believe that justice, change is possible. And the psalmist is encouraging us to hold fast to the truth, especially when life is fragile. And Paul is reminding us to persevere with faith and love. Our challenge this week is to keep watch, not despair, but in hope. And especially as we look forward towards Advent. I know, Phil, you're ready for Advent. Just like the shops there, you're ready there for Christmas. We're encouraging you all to live as people who have a high expectation for God's justice to break through in surprising places. Thank you for that, Simeon. Our encouragement is that even in small acts of faithfulness, God is already at work, restoring what has been lost. So my thanks go to you, Phil, today. Currently in Canada, my thanks go to you and to every JPIT member is our favorite member. But today, Phil, Simeon, you are our favorite JPIT member. And thank you to our listeners. I hope this episode helps you in your preaching preparations. If you've enjoyed this episode, please, please, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, and do share this episode with your friends and your networks. We also have other online spaces for further engagement and discussion about faith and politics on our social media platforms. As we go, I'm going to leave you with two things. I've really been enjoying my Desmond Tutu quotes, and I love what Habakkuk says. So I'll begin with Habakkuk and end with Desmond Tutu. How does that sound? Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, the righteous live by their faith. And I probably should have included, write the vision and make it plain. Put it on tablets. And if you're going to graffiti it, do it somewhere that is nice looking. And in the words of Desmond Tutu, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. I love that quote because it's very visual. And I describe myself as a baby elephant. So it's always a reminder for me to look out for the people that I am stepping on, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So friends, loved ones, let's go and live the gospel. Have fun enjoying your preaching and living the gospel wherever you are. Till next time, see you soon. God bless.